Let me tell you a story. A story about a man named Okonkwo, a man who knew nothing but struggle. From the moment he was born till the very day his life changed, all he ever knew was hardship. Okonkwo lived in the quiet village of Umuaka, a land blessed with fertile soil, thick forests, and rivers that sparkled under the sun. But for some reason, no matter how hard Okonkwo worked, prosperity never knocked on his door. He was a farmer, just like his father before him and his father's father. Farming was all he knew, all he had ever done. Yet, despite waking up before the first roosters crow, despite toiling under the merciless sun with his hands deep in the earth, his farm never produced enough to make life comfortable. His yam tubers were always small, his cassava thin, and his maize weak, as if the soil itself had conspired against him. But Okonkwo was not a man to complain. Even though poverty clung to him like a second skin, he carried his burden with dignity. His wife, Neka, was his pillar. A woman of strong spirit and gentle words, she never let their suffering break her. While other women grumbled and nagged their husbands about money, Neka always found a way to encourage Okonkwo. "A poor man with a good heart is better than a rich man with an evil soul," she would often say, touching his face after a long day in the farm. She did not marry him for his wealth. He had none. She married him because he was kind, because he was a good man. And together they had 3 children. Shinonso, their first son, a boy of 11 with eyes full of curiosity and mischief. Obinna, their second, only 9, who hardly spoke but had the heart of a warrior. And Adiz, the youngest, just 6, who still believed that her father was the strongest man in the world. Okonkwo would look at them sometimes and feel both pride and pain. Pride because they were his, pain because he could not give them the life they deserved. But if there was one thing that pained Okonkwo more than poverty, it was shame. In the village, wealth determined respect. And Okonkwo, being a poor man, had little of it. The worst part: his childhood friends, the men he had grown up with, had all become rich. Ikenna, Dike, and Uche, once his equals, now lords of the village. They owned large farms with strong laborers who worked for them. Their wives wore the finest wrappers, their children attended school in the city, and their homes stood tall, with zinc roofs that glowed under the sun. Every evening, these men gathered at the village square under the great Udala tree, drinking fresh palm wine and laughing like kings. And every time Okonkwo passed by, they called him, "Okonkwo, come and buy us a drink," Dike would say, shaking his big belly, knowing very well that Okonkwo could barely afford food. "Ha! Okonkwo, don't be angry, oh. We will dash you something when we are done," Uche would add, laughing with a mouth full of kola nut. "If only you had sense, you would not be suffering like this," Ikenna would say. "Look at us. Are we not your mates? We are rich. And you are still dragging a hoe to the farm like an old man." The laughter would follow Okonkwo as he walked away. His heart heavy, but his mouth shut. What could he say? That the gods were unfair. That life had cheated him. He simply went home, back to his little mud house, where the walls cracked from heat, where the thatched roof leaked when it rained, where his children slept on mats, and his wife boiled yam peels to make soup. And at night, when the whole village was asleep, Okonkwo would step outside and stare at the sky. "Why?" he often whispered to the stars. "Why do some men have everything and others have nothing?" Okonkwo was not a lazy man. He was not foolish. He did everything he could to provide for his family. Yet it was never enough. He owed money to the village traders, and every time he saw them, he would pretend not to notice their eyes following him. He had sold most of his land to pay for medicine when Shinonso fell sick, and now he only had a small piece left. During festivals, When other men bought new clothes for their children, Okonkwo's children wore the same old ones from last year. When people slaughtered goats and cooked jollof rice, his family managed with yam and palm oil. But through all this, Okonkwo still had one thing: hope. He still believed that one day things would change, that maybe the gods would smile on him, that somehow his suffering would end. But he never imagined that the change would come so suddenly. That one day, a stranger would appear in his life, offering him a path to riches, a path that seemed harmless, until it was too late. Because sometimes when a man prays for wealth, he does not know what price he will pay. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the village prepared for nightfall, Okonkwo sat outside his house, staring into the distance. He did not know that by the next full moon, his life would never be the same. He did not know that soon, the same men who mocked him would fear him. He did not know that the gods had already decided his fate, and that fate was already walking towards him. Let me tell you how it all began. It was the kind of evening when the sky turned red and gold, when the wind carried the scent of rain, and the trees swayed like they were whispering secrets to each other. Okonkwo had just returned from the farm, his body covered in sweat and dust, his mind heavy with thoughts. He had spent the whole day clearing weeds, yet his farm still looked hungry and dry. It was as if the soil itself was refusing to bless his hands. He walked home with his hoe slung over his shoulder, his feet dragging with exhaustion and frustration. As he entered the village, he saw Ikenna and the others sitting under the udala tree, drinking palm wine as usual. Their laughter rang through the air like a song he had heard too many times. "Okonkwo, why do you like to suffer?" Ikenna called out, raising his wooden cup. "See how tired you look, Ken. When will you stop slaving for nothing?" Okonkwo said nothing. He just walked past them, ignoring their voices, pretending their words did not sting. But deep inside, something in him was breaking. He had tried. He had fought. Yet, poverty still clung to him like a disease with no cure. And that was when he saw the stranger. The man stood by the roadside, watching him. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple white wrapper, with a strange air of calmness around him. His eyes, sharp like a hawk's, followed Okonkwo as he walked past. "Good evening, my friend," the man greeted, his voice smooth like the surface of a river. Okonkwo hesitated. He did not know this man, yet something about him made it hard to ignore him. "Good evening," Okonkwo replied. The man smiled. "You look troubled. A man who works this hard should not carry such sadness on his face." Okonkwo sighed. It was true, but what could he say? Did this man expect him to start listing all his sufferings like a market list? "Life is hard, my brother," Okonkwo finally said. "But what can a man do? I just have to keep pushing." The man nodded, as if he understood something Okonkwo did not. "What if I told you there is a way to end your suffering?" the stranger said, his voice lowering as if he was about to reveal a great secret. Okonkwo frowned. He had heard such things before. In every village, there were men who promised wealth, but in the end, their ways always led to bloodshed or evil deeds. "I am not interested in anything that will make me kill or harm people," Okonkwo said firmly. The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Ah, Okonkwo, you think I do not know you. You are a good man. That is why I chose to talk to you. The way I want to help you. It does not involve blood." At this, Okonkwo's ears opened wide. No blood, no killing, no human sacrifice. Could it really be possible? "Tell me more," Okonkwo said, trying to sound uninterested, but his heart was already beating fast. The man moved closer. "It is simple," he began, his voice smooth and convincing. "There is a small ritual, but it is nothing dangerous. No blood, no death. Just a little sacrifice to open the doors of wealth for you." "What kind of sacrifice?" Okonkwo asked cautiously. "A white fowl," the man said. "A handful of kola nuts, and a clay pot of river water." Okonkwo blinked. "That was all?" "That is all?" he asked, unable to hide his shock. The man smiled. "That is all?" Okonkwo stared at him, his mind racing. Sounded too easy, too simple. But was it not better than suffering for the rest of his life? "And after this sacrifice," Okonkwo asked, "what happens?" "Your farm will flourish," the man promised. "Your barns will be full. Money will find its way to you. Everything you touch will prosper." A chill ran down Okonkwo's spine. Could it really be true? Was this his chance? He thought about Neka, about Shinonso, Obinna, and little Adiz. He thought about the hunger in their eyes, the patches on their clothes, the way his children sometimes watched other kids eat fried meat and jollof rice at the village square. And at that moment, his heart wavered. He had been praying for a way out. And now maybe the gods had sent him one. "What do I have to do?" he asked. The man's smile widened. "Meet me tomorrow night at the old shrine near the river," he said. "Come alone. Bring the items. And remember, this is not blood money. You will not kill. You will not harm. You will only receive." Okonkwo nodded. His hands felt sweaty, his mouth dry. As he walked home that night, a battle raged inside him. Was he about to change his life for the better? Or was he about to take the first step into something he would regret forever? Little did he know that this was the beginning of his greatest mistake. They say a poor man's voice is drowned in laughter and mockery, but a rich man's whisper is heard like thunder in the sky. The morning after the ritual, Okonkwo woke up feeling different. There was a certain lightness in his chest, a strange calmness in his spirit. The events of the night before still felt like a dream. The dark woods, the burning incense, the way the stranger's voice had echoed in the shrine. He had done everything exactly as he was told. And now he waited. As usual, he took his hoe and cutlass and made his way to the farm. The sun was not even fully up yet, but Okonkwo did not mind. The mockery of his friends still rang in his ears, pushing him to work harder. But as soon as he stepped onto his farm, his heart nearly stopped. Before him stood yams, fat, tall, and healthy, the kind he had never seen in all his years of farming. The ridges, which had been dry and cracking just yesterday, were now moist and fresh, as if the rain had visited in the middle of the night. The leaves of his cocoyams stretched proudly, no longer wilted. He bent down, touched the soil, and felt it, soft and rich, like it had been blessed by the gods themselves. "What is happening?" Okonkwo whispered to himself, his fingers trembling as he dug into the soil and pulled out a yam tuber. It was huge, bigger than anything he had ever harvested before. He pulled out another and another, each one bigger and better than the last. His breathing became ragged, his hands shaky. Could this really be happening? He dropped to his knees, staring at the miracle before him. Had begun. That week, Okonkwo's life changed faster than the wind during Harmattan. First it was the farm. Every single crop he harvested was the best in the market. Buyers flooded his compound, offering to buy everything he had. Within days, he had bags of cowries, the kind of money he had never seen in his life. Then more miracles followed. One morning as he sat outside, a trader from the next village came to him. "I heard you are a man of wisdom, Okonkwo," the man said, sitting before him. "I have a business proposal for you." Business. No one had ever approached Okonkwo for business before. He had always been the one begging for help, not the one being sought after. But now everything was different. The trader offered him a chance to invest in palm oil trading, something Okonkwo never imagined he could do. With the money he had made from his farm, he agreed immediately. And just like that, Okonkwo's wealth doubled, then tripled. Soon he built the biggest house in the village. The mud hut where his family once lived was torn down, replaced with a grand 3-room hut with bamboo windows and a large compound. The villagers gathered every day to admire it, their mouths hanging open in shock. Okonkwo! The same Okonkwo we mocked. They whispered. How did this happen? What secret is he hiding? A shift in power. With wealth came power. Ikena, Obiora, and the others who once mocked Okonkwo suddenly became his friends. They no longer called him Okonkwo the poor farmer. Instead they called him Okonkwo the wise man. They came to his compound with gifts, seeking his favor. My brother, forgive me for the way I treated you before, Ikena said one evening, bringing a keg of fresh palm wine. You know, we were just playing. We didn't mean any harm. Okonkwo smiled but said nothing. He knew their friendship was fake, but he enjoyed the power. The same men who once bullied him now begged to sit at his table. It was a feeling unlike anything he had ever known. But the village was not blind. People talked in hushed tones, their voices filled with curiosity and fear. How did he become rich so fast? What kind of magic is behind this? Something is not right. The elders called secret meetings, discussing Okonkwo's sudden rise to wealth. The women whispered among themselves, warning their children to stay away from his compound. Riches do not come overnight, they murmured. There is something strange about this. First, Okonkwo ignored them. Let them talk. He was enjoying his new life, and nothing else mattered. But one person was not fooled. His wife, Neka, watched him closely. She noticed the way he would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, mumbling to himself. She saw how he avoided certain places in the village, how he always looked over his shoulder, as if someone was watching him. And when she finally confronted him, Okonkwo just laughed. You worry too much, Neka, he said, placing a bag of cowries in her hands. Look at how beautiful our life has become. Shouldn't you be happy? But Neka was not smiling, because deep in her heart she knew something was terribly wrong. Okonkwo had convinced himself that his new life was secure, that his wealth would never run dry. But the gods do not give without taking. It was a cold night when Okonkwo heard the first whisper of doom. He had just finished eating, his belly full of pounded yam and bitter leaf soup, when he heard a soft knock on his door. His heart jumped. It was late, too late for visitors. Slowly, he rose from his stool and walked toward the door. His hands felt strangely cold as he unbolted it. Standing outside was a small boy, no older than 10. His eyes were dark and lifeless, his face expressionless. My master sends his greetings, the boy said in a voice that sounded far too old for his small body. Okonkwo's skin prickled. Which master? He asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. The boy handed him a small black calabash. Inside was a folded piece of brown, crumpled paper. Without another word, the boy turned and disappeared into the darkness, his small feet making no sound on the ground. Okonkwo's hands shook as he unfolded the note. The words were written in thick, red ink, as if dipped in blood. It is time. The sacrifice must be renewed. This time, the offering must come from your own blood. For a long moment, Okonkwo could not breathe. his own blood. This was not part of the agreement. He had done everything the stranger had asked, had followed the instructions without question. His farm had flourished. His wealth had grown. He had earned his respect. So why this? He read the message again and again, hoping the words would change. But they did not. The meaning was clear. They wanted his daughter. For days, Okonkwo could not sleep. He became restless, paranoid. His thoughts tangled in confusion. He could not bear to look at his daughter. She was only 7 years old, a child full of innocence and laughter. She would run to him every morning, her small arms wrapping around his waist as she giggled. "Papa, carry me." And now, he was supposed to give her up. He could not. He would not. But what if he refused? Would his wealth vanish overnight? Would his farm dry up again? Would he become the poor, useless Okonkwo that everyone mocked? That thought terrified him more than death itself. And so, greed began to whisper in his ears. Just one child. You can always have more children. What is the use of a daughter when you can have everything you've ever wanted? The voices became louder each day, eating into his soul like termites on old wood, until finally his mind was made up. The night of the sacrifice was moonless. The sky was black and empty, as if the gods themselves had turned their backs. Okonkwo waited until midnight, then gently woke Adan. "Enemy, wake up," he whispered, forcing a smile. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes. "Papa, where are we going?" "It's a secret, my child. Papa wants to show you something special." She grinned, excited. "Will you buy me sweets after?" His throat burned. "Yes, my child. I will buy you all the sweets you want." He carried her on his back and walked deep into the forest, his heartbeat pounding louder than his footsteps. The journey felt endless. Every tree seemed to whisper his sins. Every shadow seemed to watch him. At last, he reached the sacred shrine, the same place where it all began. The stranger was waiting, dressed in black robes, his face hidden behind a mask. He stood beside a burning clay pot, the flames dancing wildly in the darkness. "You have come," the stranger said. "Good." Okonkwo placed Adan down, his hands trembling. The little girl looked around, confused. "Papa, I'm scared." He knelt before her, cupping her face in his hands. "Do not be afraid, Nini. Just close your eyes. It will be over soon." She obeyed, trusting him completely. And in that moment, as he raised the knife, something inside him snapped. He saw flashes, memories of her birth, the first time she called him Papa, the way she always ran into his arms, laughing. How could he do this? How could he trade his own child for wealth? He dropped the knife, breathing heavily. "I can't," he said. "I can't do it." The stranger's eyes flashed with anger. "Then you will lose everything." Okonkwo grabbed his daughter and ran. Through the forest, through the darkness, through the whispers of unseen spirits, their voices howling in the wind. And when he finally reached his compound, he collapsed at the doorstep, holding Adan tightly, his body shaking. By morning, the consequences had begun. His farm, once green and full, was bare. The yams had rotted overnight, the leaves had withered, the soil had turned to dust. His house, once the pride of the village, began to crack. The wealth he had gained vanished like smoke in the wind. The villagers whispered, their voices filled with fear and suspicion. "The gods are punishing him. Something is not right." But worst of all, Okonkwo could no longer sleep. Every night he would wake up to whispers. Shadows moved in his room. He heard the voice of the stranger, mocking him from the darkness. "You were given a choice, Okonkwo. Now the gods will take what is theirs, in their own way." He tried to pray, but the gods would not listen. He tried to run, but where could he go? And then one night, he woke up and found something on his bed. Small black calabash. Inside, a single strand of Adan's hair. And that was when he knew they were coming for her. The wind howled through the village, carrying with it the whispers of unseen spirits. The moon was hidden behind thick, dark clouds, as if the gods themselves refused to witness what was about to unfold. Okonkwo sat on the floor of his hut, his knees drawn to his chest, his heart pounding like a war drum. The black calabash with Adan's hair sat before him, a cruel reminder that the gods were not done with him. His wealth was gone, his farm destroyed, and now his daughter, his innocent, sweet Adan, was marked by forces he could not escape. But Okonkwo was not the only one who sensed the danger. Nneka, Okonkwo's wife, had not slept in days. She had noticed her husband's restlessness, the way he avoided her gaze, the way he barely ate. And worst of all, the way he flinched every time he looked at Adan. Something was terribly wrong. That night, as Okonkwo crept out of the hut, she followed. She moved silently, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her breath slow and steady. She watched as Okonkwo carried Adan toward the forest, his shoulders tense, his steps hesitant. Fear gripped her. Where was he taking their daughter at this ungodly hour? She followed him deeper into the woods, stepping carefully, her ears straining for any sound. Then she saw it. A shrine. The burning clay pot. And the man in the black robes waiting in the darkness. Nneka's breath caught in her throat. And then she saw the knife. Her heart stopped. Okonkwo, her husband, the man she had loved and stood by for years, was about to kill their own daughter. A mother's cry. "No!" Her scream tore through the night, shattering the silence like a calabash thrown against a rock. Okonkwo froze, his hands shaking violently. Adan's eyes flew open, terror flooding her small face. Before Okonkwo could react, Nneka lunged at him, pushing him away from their daughter. "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" she screamed, her voice raw with pain. Adan, confused and frightened, ran into her mother's arms, sobbing. The man in black sighed loudly, as if annoyed by the interruption. "Women," he muttered, shaking his head. "Always ruining things." Nneka turned to him, her eyes burning with rage. "Who are you? What have you done to my husband?" The man chuckled, a deep, haunting sound that echoed through the forest. "I gave him what he asked for." Okonkwo fell to his knees, weeping. I didn't know it would come to this. Please, I beg you." But the man ignored him. Instead, he turned to Nneka, his dark eyes glowing. "Since you have interfered, let us see what your village thinks of your husband's sins." He clapped his hands twice, and suddenly, the forest came alive with voices. Lanterns flickered. Feet rushed through the undergrowth. The villagers had arrived. The village chief, Ichimedu, stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. Behind him, the elders and warriors held their machetes, their eyes filled with suspicion. "Okonkwo," the chief thundered. "What is the meaning of this? Why have you brought your daughter to this cursed place?" Before Okonkwo could answer, Nneka spoke, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "He was going to sacrifice our daughter," she cried. "All for wealth. This man, this demon, deceived him." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Okonkwo buried his face in his hands. "It is true," he whispered. The villagers turned to the man in black, but he only laughed. "I only give what is asked of me," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Your dear Okonkwo came to me, desperate and foolish. I granted his wish. And now he cannot pay the price." The chief raised his staff. "Spirit or not, you will answer for your crimes." But before anyone could move, the man in black began to fade, his body melting into the shadows. "You cannot punish what you do not understand," he murmured. "But do not worry. The gods will take what they are owed, one way or another." And just like that he was gone. All eyes turned to Okonkwo. Some were filled with anger, others with pity. The chief's voice was like thunder. "Okonkwo, you have brought shame upon this land. You have betrayed your family, your ancestors, and the gods themselves." Okonkwo could not lift his head. "What do we do with him?" one elder asked. "Banish him," someone shouted. "Let the gods judge him," another voice called. But then a Dan stepped forward. Her small hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Please," she whispered. "Don't hurt my papa." Tears streamed down Okonkwo's face. He turned to his daughter, his entire body trembling. "My child, I do not deserve your mercy." The chief sighed. "Okonkwo, do you regret your actions?" Okonkwo fell to the ground, his forehead pressed against the dirt. "I do. I swear it. If I could turn back time, I would rather be the poorest man in this village than trade my child for riches. I was blind. I was foolish. Please, forgive me." A long silence followed. Then the chief spoke. "You will not be banished, but your name will forever carry shame. The gods have marked you, Okonkwo. You will live, but you will never escape the scars of your sin." Okonkwo nodded, his heart heavy with sorrow. Life went on. Okonkwo lived as a broken man, farming what little land remained to him. The villagers never spoke of him with respect again. His once grand house remained cracked and crumbling, a warning to all who sought shortcuts to fortune. But he was grateful. Grateful that his daughter was alive. Grateful that he had been given a chance to repent. And every night, when he heard the wind whispering through the trees, he knew the gods had not forgotten. They never do.
This story teaches us that greed has consequences. Quick riches come at a dangerous price. Hard work and patience bring true success. Every shortcut has a cost. Nothing in life is truly free. If something seems too easy, there's always a hidden price. A mother's love can save lives. Neko's instincts and courage protected her daughter from harm. The truth always comes out. No matter how much we try to hide our wrongs, they will be exposed in the end. Repentance brings mercy, but mistakes leave scars. Okonkwo was forgiven, but his past could never be erased. If you have watched this story till the end, thank you so much. Your support means the world to me. To my returning subscribers, I truly appreciate you. Your encouragement keeps this channel alive. If this is your first time here, please don't leave without subscribing. Your support helps this channel grow, and I promise to keep bringing you amazing and inspiring stories. If you got value from this video, please like this video. Comment your thoughts below. Share with your friends and family. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Your support keeps this channel going. Let's keep growing together. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.